Hey everybody, it is late at night and I am Norman. Tonight we're going to be discussing the history of Nomos, and we'll be revisiting one of the very first watches that I ever reviewed on this channel. So let us begin. Most of you out there have heard of Nomos, and some of you even know that this brand is a fairly young brand, being founded in 1990. However, fewer people know that this brand is actually a reincarnation of an old brand by the same name. Yes, Nomos is actually a reboot. The original Nomos was a Glashütte brand that was founded in 1906. It was founded by a man named Guido Müller. He was a businessman who set up Nomos as a mail-order watch company. So he teamed up with his brother-in-law, who actually happened to be a watchmaker. So their original watches could only be purchased via mail order. The name Nomos has its origins in Greek mythology. Nomos was the daemon of statutes, laws, and ordinances. The original Nomos company was very successful, until a certain fellow Glashütte company that you may be familiar with, Lange & Son, accused Nomos of being a con. They claimed that Nomos was taking Swiss-made watches and claiming that they were Glashütte watches. In response, Müller put out adverts exposing other Glashütte companies of doing that exact same thing, of purchasing Swiss parts and putting them into Glashütte watches. And this is where it gets interesting, because even though Müller was 100% correct, a judge ruled against him and he was no longer allowed to put out the truth. And due to this ruling, the company ended up going bankrupt. I've done a ton of searching online, and so far I've only been able to find one original Nomos watch. They all kind of get drowned out by the rebooted Nomos watches. This particular piece has a black dial. It featured a railroad-style minutes track around the edge of the dial, and elegant-looking Roman numerals for the hour markers. There was a second subdial just above the 6 o'clock position, and that complication featured a nice-looking hand with a lollipop counterweight on it. The hour and minutes hands were extremely elegant with delicate decorations cut into them. It had an oversized onion crown and a pocket watch-style hinged cover over the dial. The case back on this watch was also hinged. So fast forward to 1990, Nomos has been rebooted, and they put out an amazing watch that I happen to own. Ah, the Nomos Anthracite. Look at that watch. This thing is absolutely brilliant. And it's actually one of the first Bauhaus watches that I ever purchased. It was intended to be a replacement for my Zeno Bauhaus Winder. However, that watch was actually quite a bit different from this one. When you see pictures of this online, it looks like a Bauhaus watch. When you see it in person, it looks like a dress watch, because these indices are chrome. In those pictures, they look almost like white indices. They're really bright, but in person, as you can see, it's definitely a dress watch and less Bauhaus-y looking. So it wasn't really a replacement for the Zeno, but it's brilliant. I mean, you can't go wrong with the Nomos. And the Orion line has a lot of different models to choose from. Some of the colorways that you can get these watches in: there's white dial ones with blued hands and gold tone hour markers. There's white dial watches with silver hands and hour markers. There's a light rose dial with gold hands and hour markers, a dark blue dial with silver hands and hour markers, and an oversized date at the 3 o'clock position. There's a gray dial with gold hands and gold markers, and an oversized date at 3 also. There's this with the anthracite dial and silver hands and markers. There's also the Orion 1989, which features a dark gray dial and gold hands and hour markers, as well as the Orion 38, with a light gray dial, silver hands, and hour markers. There's even a Neomatic variant of the Orion that features an automatic movement, These watches have an additional millimeter of thickness to their cases in order to accommodate the movement within. And as you can see, this is a very thin watch. I particularly like the white dial with black hour and minute hands and a red sub-seconds hand. That colorway looks absolutely brilliant. There are variants with large dates at the 6 o'clock position and even a 33mm two-hand version. The one that I own is the reference 307. This is a 35mm watch, and that anthracite dial is exquisite. It kind of has a texture to it there. The lugs are a point of contention with this watch. As you can see, they're really long and there's a gap here that's kind of sizable. They're drilled, which is nice. And I mentioned the lugs in my review of this watch, and honestly it doesn't bother me at all. When it's on the wrist, I personally don't even notice. It does make this watch wear larger than it is, which might be a good thing if you're used to larger watches. The movement in this has a 43-hour power reserve, and it happens to be one of my favorite movements, the Bauhaus 7001, or also known as the ETA 001, a hand-wound movement, and that movement is only 2.6 millimeters thick, which is so crazy to think about. Let's put this thing on the wrist, and I'll discuss more about what I think about this watch. Let me take my vintage gold watch off. I believe this is a doctor's military watch. There it is, on my 7-inch wrist. This strap is not the one that it came on, but it is a Nomos strap. I just bought the shorter version because the one that it shipped on was kind of long for me. The sad thing about this watch is it doesn't seem to hold its resale value. I've seen some listed as low as $1,100. So that's around half of the suggested retail price of $1,900. So if you are going to go for these, I would recommend looking for a deal. Definitely don't pay that full price for them. But, I mean, look at how gorgeous that is. And the chrome on this watch is something else. When I challenged myself to wear this watch alone for a week, that was the one thing that kept sticking out to me. You would glance down at your wrist and all you see is just amazing chrome. Yeah. And it definitely wears large for its size. So if you're nervous about that case size, it wears larger than it is on paper, that's for sure. So if you are a larger watch person, you could hunt down some of the, I think there's variants of this that are in 38 millimeters. You could hunt those down, and those would probably be just fine for you. Absolute brilliance. It feels good returning to this watch again. Oh, the memories. So there you have it, a bit of Nomos' history and a look back on one of the first watches that I ever reviewed on this channel. I still own it and I still love it, even though it doesn't get a ton of wrist time. I think it's just too pure dress watch. But I would never consider selling it. This watch is just amazing. Thanks for watching.